Hey, what's up everybody? This is Infamous getting back with some Anthem, doing a little video. Let's lower that down a bit. So Anthem recently came out with some new information here, so I was just going over it. Looking forward to some of the information that they're going to be putting out. I believe it's going to be this Friday. They're supposed to be coming out with a stream. I'm hoping they're putting out some gameplay footage, because that's really what I'm looking forward to. I want to see some gameplay footage. I want to see a little bit more of the combat, a little more detail about the different types of way you can gear out your suit. I'm hoping that they're going to put out some really good information on that. Looking forward to it. Hopefully you guys are. If you're, stay tuned. We're going to be going over some of the details of the different javelin suits that we have here. Up in the upper left corner, we're looking at the Colossus. Just below him, you're taking a look at the Ranger, and of course right in the center you have my favorite, the Storm, and of course off to the right we have the roguelike Interceptor class. So for those of you that don't know, Anthem is made by BioWare. It's primarily, BioWare is known for their fantastic storytelling. I'm hoping that Anthem has a really good storyline to it, because I'm not looking for this game to have any sort of PvP in it. BioWare is really good at telling a great story, and I hope that that's what they stick with. And hopefully EA doesn't get too much in the way when it comes to their storyline and how they're going to interact with their user base. With that said, I wanted to go into a little bit of the discussion. If you haven't had the opportunity to take a look at the most recent trailer, it's posted there on the Anthem website. I'll probably play it at the end of the stream. Did want to touch on a little bit on the discussion with the different sort of javelins that you're going to be exposed to. So with that said, from what I understand, the Ranger class, or the Ranger Javelin, is basically the suit that you're introduced to. It's basically your jack of all trades. Every javelin, of course, can equip the gun, has both a melee attack and as well as special abilities. Looking at the actual class itself, if you haven't seen the little trailer that they showed, the different abilities, there was a nice little clip that they had posted on their website. We'll take a look at it. But you see the javelin there, it kind of reminds me of Bumblebee. I don't know if they kind of did it on purpose. Even the way it fights, if you've watched like some of the clips, it kind of reminds me of the way Bumblebee from Transformers fights, and it really has that look to it, the black and yellow. I was like, did they do that intentionally to kind of draw in fans of Transformers? But with that said, let's take a look at the clip for the Ranger. Kind of goes into detail about the skills that's available to it, as it's the jack of all trades. With that, let's take a look at the Ranger and its abilities. So it's posted on the oh, that was loud. Let's lower that down. So I do like the aerial maneuvers that they are kind of displaying here in the video game. Video game does look nice, but it's 2019. It's what's to be expected. That looked like the ice grenade for ceasing your opponents. Every javelin has either a melee attack or some sort of a weapon that it can use, and this particular javelin can use a mace, and you saw that animation right there. He kind of leaps into the air and drives down his mace and does a lot of damage. Can CC as it did a knockdown. I'm not sure if you got to take a look at it. It did a knockdown animation right here. So that's the CC from the frost grenade, and then the javelin can do an aerial maneuver for a melee attack. Of course, we're seeing some of the aerial combat for the javelin, as well as here you're going to see cluster grenades. Basically an AoE. I believe that's the fire one. It does an ignite. But every javelin basically has its own set of skills that it can load, either changing their weapons, and then there's a secondary set of abilities that the javelin in particular can use. So you have your ranger javelin weaponry. They can use every type of heavy armor, every type except for heavy armor, which is exclusive, except for the heavy weapons, which is exclusively left for the Colossus, which is basically the tank of the 4 different types. As you can see there, it talks about it does a shock mace as its melee ability, as well as the different grenades that it has access to is the frag grenade. There's an inferno grenade. Of course, it's a large area of effect that does fire. We already saw the fire frag grenade. I'm not sure if they showed a clip of the secret grenade. I think it was in one of their earlier videos they showed, and I don't think I've seen the sticky bomb. But these are basically like the secondary loadouts. You can either spec for more damage, and then there's your secondary spec where you can, as from what it describes here, is you can basically spec for either support or damage. So you either get like homing missiles or venom darts or blast missiles, or you can actually have a skill set that's related more to assisting your allies in getting, it says there, a tactical advantage. So you can put out a bulwark point, which is a spherical field, which deflects incoming enemy projectiles. So I think all of the javelins have a way to both go, of course, to gear for offensive, as well as gearing for group play. Of course, the Anthem can be played solo, but of course, if you wanted to play with your friends, then of course you can go in with your friends and you can kind of create builds to clear content. And so that's good. I'm hoping that the difficulty for group play is there, as well as for people who want to play solo. Maybe you're not in the mood to do any grouping and you're able to do a lot of the content and clear that content on your own. I'm hoping that's going to be well balanced. I'm not looking for this game to have any sort of PvP. I think they would have a very difficult time with all these different skills, abilities, as well as the different gear. Trying to balance this particular game for PvP, I think, would be too difficult, and I really don't think BioWare is really, that's not their forte. They're really good at telling a really good storyline with a very beautiful game, and I'm hoping that's what they stick to. So this is basically the javelin that you're first introduced to. It's the javelin that you'll learn, and then from there they'll introduce other javelins, which we'll be discussing. So the tank javelin, so the Ranger is the first one. The second one, or one of the other ones that you'll come in contact with during your play, would be the Colossus. And the Colossus is basically the tank style for those who like the very bulky sort of exoskeleton that this particular javelin sports. It's basically meant for heavy weaponry. It is the only javelin that can sport the heavy weapons, and I've also seen it geared out with a flamethrower. It's got a flamethrower, and as well as for defensive, the javelin can equip the shield. It's basically your tank. It's what's used. You see there's a boss, I believe that was the Brood Mother, that they showed in one of the live streams that they did, and one of the Colossus, there was 2 of them in that stream, and one of them pulls out a shield, and we'll take a look at the clip that's posted from Anthem on their website. They basically show the different skill sets for the Colossus, which we'll take a look at now. And so as you can see, Colossus very bulky, doesn't fly or maneuver as quickly. It's different than all of the other javelins, is that it doesn't actually have a secondary melee weapon. It actually uses the chassis. So as you saw there, it basically jumped in the air and then came down with a heavy arm, basically knocking back, as it's meant to, knock back small opponents, as well as, of course, doing damage. So you see there, this is actually another Colossus, and you can see the shield, but in this clip you can see the Colossus with the heavy weapons. Colossus also has the secondary weapons on the back that are designed for either CCing or some sort of crowd control. Here's a clip of the flamethrower. And then you'll see here it does like another cluster grenade. This either does explosive damage for killing small minions or for some sort of crowd control. And you saw there's the shield. And then, so the difference between also the Colossus and other javelins is that the Colossus doesn't have a shield. So every other javelin has access to a shield that replenishes over time. And this javelin doesn't. It has a huge HP pool, as the character or the javelin is designed for basically tanking, and it has a shield to mitigate damage, and that's basically the primary purpose. In talking about some of the weaponry that it can use, of course it does the heavy smash, which we saw, where the javelin kind of jumps into the air, comes down, hits the ground, basically is this big AoE. It could also knock down its opponents, as well as doing, of course, AoE damage. It's got the different mortars that shoot from the back, whether it's meant for explosive damage, or it has one that does like a fire volley, which basically pummels the area with flame mortars. It has a flame wall mortar that's meant to do heavy damage that try to move through it. So it's kind of like area denial with that particular ability. It also has what's referred to as a lightning coil, which is meant for a single target, and then it arcs from the Colossus, and targeting them with a status effect. I'm not sure what the status effect is, as it doesn't say on the website, but in looking at the rest of the abilities here, let's see, I'll put this up on the stream so you can take a look at it. So it also has a shot coil, which emits waves of electricity out from the Colossus, damaging all nearby. So basically, as you're going to be a front line, so anybody that's coming in contact with you, so you're going to take electrical damage. The Colossus also has the heavy assault launcher gear, which we saw that's located on the Colossus's back. I believe it's over the left shoulder. You'll see he's got the heavy cannon, which we saw, the flamethrower, as well as the flat cannon. There's a rail gun, which we saw in that very first clip, where one Colossus was shooting the other that had the shield, and I believe that was the heavy rail gun. I haven't seen a clip with the acid splitter. I'm assuming that does some sort of damage over time. And then, of course, the Colossus has the ability to taunt all enemies within a radius to divert their attacks. So the one thing that I found kind of odd was that I haven't seen any abilities that kind of heal the rest of your group, but yet there is a tank to help mitigate it. And the weird thing is that there's no way to replenish your HP in the game outside, from what I've seen, outside of picking up little nodes that fall when you kill like any of the small minions. They drop like this little red circle, and it replenishes your HP. Your actual shield, that only replenishes when you're out of combat, so you actually have to stop attacking for about 3 seconds, from what I've seen from the live streams that the developers have done. And then after 3 seconds, your shield starts to replenish itself, but your HP doesn't. So the weird thing is I wonder how that's gonna work out if, so fighting a boss solo. How is you as a solo player, maybe if you're not that good at the game, how are you gonna clear the content without any sort of healer or any sort of tank? I really want to see how that's gonna work out. I'm not sure if they thought it through. And then the Colossus also has a deflector pulse that gives all nearby allies damage resistance. So it's very interesting that they have a support tank, and we're going to go over the rest of the abilities for the other classes, and I want to see if they've introduced any sort of ability to regenerate your HP or to give you shields while you're in combat, because I haven't seen any ability or any content that shows that where your shield is actually regenerating while you're in combat. Of course, the Colossus also has the siege cannon, and of course the Colossus, like I said before, it's the upfront javelin that's meant for tanking and for support. So if that's your playstyle, if you like the brawler sort of character, then the Colossus is definitely the one that's you're going to want to play, as it's primarily designed for that upfront, in your face, heavy artillery gameplay. And if you like supporting your team, you can do that. You can tank as well as offer damage mitigation for the rest of your team. The next one that I'm looking forward to seeing is the kind of the rogue style character, and it's called the Interceptor. It has a very sleek design to it. I really like the shape of the head. If you see there, kind of reminds me of like the head from Aliens. It has that really conal shape in the back. And of course the Interceptor is designed for what looks like rogue-like gameplay. It can feature, from what I've seen, it shows where the javelin actually is designed for very quick, short bursts of killing power. It cannot take a lot of damage. It's not designed to take a lot of damage, but it's designed to dish out a lot of damage. And so we'll take a look at the clip that they posted with the different abilities that the Interceptor has, and we'll take a look at that right now. So kind of like the Ranger, it has the very mobile while flying. I do like the colors. It's very sleek, very nice design for a javelin. You see, it's very mobile. That was what you saw right there, was the melee attack for the Interceptor, where it uses its body to deal out damage. As you can see there, it kind of nice little backflips. So it's really designed around mitigating damage by evasion. And of course, it uses its body there to deal out damage. What you're seeing here is a melee ability. It kind of shoots out the little daggers or shurikens that the javelin has access to. It's really meant for, you know, basically, if you're not using your gun, then you have another way to kind of do damage from range, and they explode. And then we'll see here, very mobile javelin compared to what we've seen with the Colossus. Very slow moving, very clunky. The Ranger, more of the jack of all trade, as it's the one that you first get introduced to. And you'll see, not really meant to take a lot of damage. Person is doing much to avoid. And then here we're seeing the ultimate for the Interceptor, where it basically, the body glows, and then it basically gets damage reduction and of course, you know, damage output. And it goes into, and you'll see the kind of the daggers that it kind of has there. And of course, it does a lot of burst, a lot of mobility, of course, and you would expect that from a rogue type javelin. Looks very interesting. I wonder if that little indicator, what this indicator was. Like, you see it, you see the indicator when he uses his ability, his ultimate here. 1 second. So it actually shows him when he uses his ultimate, it kind of glows a different color. Of course, it does this fancy animation, and then of course he has that glow around him. But then you'll actually see another indicator, and I wonder if this is the ultimate ending, and you'll see it right there. And I wonder if that lets you know that the ultimate ended. Of course, I would imagine that the ultimate is meant for short bursts, and that was a pretty good burst of about maybe 10-15 seconds. And of course, that's what I would imagine that that indicator was to let you know that your ultimate had ended, or at least I would hope that they have really clear visuals for letting you know when certain abilities end, whether it's a buff or debuff or a taunt, or whether it's you're using an ultimate like that. So that's very clear when your ultimate is about to end, because I don't see any timers. I would imagine that they wouldn't want to clunk the UI with timers on your screen to let you know when certain abilities were going to run out. And so it's really nice to have a clear visual of when these indicators are basically gonna run out. And so if you kind of like that rogue style gameplay, then the interceptor is definitely the class for you, as it's designed for very agile combat. And looking at the abilities there, of course the interceptor cannot use the heavy weapons. It's specifically designed for the Colossus, but what it can use is it has access to wielding every weapon type except for heavy weapons, and of course the Colossus can do wield the machine guns, but the interceptor can. So the melee ability that it does that we saw was it says there, which can be used to deal damage to targets at very close range. So it's that twirling ability where you kind of land, from what we saw before, and of course that's designed for doing damage as well as mitigation. It says it doesn't need to be earned, or can it be changed. It also has access to double-bladed daggers. It says the interceptor uses a pair of double-bladed daggers to deliver a multi-hit flurry of slashes, dealing damage in a chain of powerful attacks that can be continued indefinitely. So I think that's pretty interesting. So this is what I mean. Like, abilities like this would be very difficult to balance in a PvP environment, especially with the ability to fly, as well as, you know, you're gonna be for me, I think the developers would have a very hard time in this particular game trying to balance PvP between the abilities, flying, ultimates, the different gear loadouts, the different weapons that they can have. You know, especially if you're doing like end game content and you're getting, you know, legendary weapons and stuff like that. I mean, that was the problem, one of the problems I should say, that things like Destiny had, where it was very difficult for them balancing their game. I've seen a lot of their PvP on streams, nothing very special or interesting about it, and I think it would actually pull away funds and resources from making the PvE better in that game. And so I wouldn't want to see that in Anthem. I would want them to stick to the design of making really good PvE content, maybe raiding, end game content, the different sorts of way that you can gear out your javelin, as well as telling a really interactive and immersive storyline. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm hoping to see, and I'm hoping this Friday with the stream that they're going to be putting out, that we'll get some more gameplay footage, as we're really hungering for some of that. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to get into the beta. I wouldn't, even if I got in, I wouldn't have been able to play. It was my weekend to work anyway, so I wouldn't have the opportunity to take advantage of that. But I know other people did, and hopefully we'll be able to get some information once the NDA lifts. But with this particular javelin has access to the Seeker glaives, which is what we saw there. See if we can clip back over where the javelin was kind of shooting out these little, like, looks like ninja stars. Basically those are designed to seek out the nearest target. It also has access to something similar to the Colossus. It has an acid bomb, which does area of effect, and I would imagine it either does some sort of mitigating armor or damage over time. Usually, like, an acid has some sort of like corrosive effect. So I would imagine that that does either reducing the other javelin's armor or doing some type of damage over time or some other status effect. Of course, there is the Cryoglaive, which is designed to freeze enemies on impact. And then it has a cluster mines. It throws out a group of mines onto a target area, which explode on contact within the area. So it does basically kind of like an area denial. It also has access to the Spark Dash, where it dashes forward, leaving behind a trail of electricity that damages enemies. And of course, the secondary system, the Interceptor Javelin Strike system, it does, and I believe this is the melee. Excuse me. This would be either their ultimate loadout. It says charges the enemy with energy that explodes after a delay. The explosion deals increased damage if the target is destroyed before the full duration. And so I'm hoping, again, since we're seeing abilities with timers, that these abilities will have very clear indicators of when their timer is up. And so looking at the website, you can see there it says the explosion deals increased damage if the target is destroyed before the full duration. So like I was saying, I'm very hopeful that they'll have very clear indicators for when your abilities are about to end, because I did not see any timers on the UI from any of the clips or any of the gameplay that they showed. The only thing I saw was, if you were watching, which we'll take a look at in a little bit, the other live stream where I think they were using a controller during that event, where you saw whenever they were using ability, the current placeholder was where you saw the ability was kind of filling in, like it was like a little box, and it was basically filling back up to let you know when it was full. But there are numerous abilities in the game. Wonder how many you have access to at once, but having clear indicators in terms of visual effects would go a long way into making it very clear, and for the purpose of efficient combat. Of course, the plasma star there says tosses a plasma and powered shuriken at a single target, effective at long range. And so a class that's, or a suit designed for up in your face, has access to at least one long range ability, which I'm sure would be really good, like doing boss fights where maybe certain bosses aren't melee friendly or have certain aspects that are not melee friendly. And of course, this would give you access to a long range ability to use. Nova Strike sends out a projection of the Interceptor, which attacks enemies it comes in contact with. I wonder if that ability can be used like as a decoy. Like, do they, it's kind of what it sounds like. Sounds like this is the Javelin's way of damage avoidance. Of course, you have the Tempest Strike is a devastating single attack that can stun smaller enemies. And I'm wondering how, maybe in high difficulty, you'll need access to these different CCs in the game. I wonder if there's a timer where, like, you CC a mob and then it can't be CC'd after that, because then you can kind of chain CC with your whole team particular mobs that maybe either do really high damage or are offering heals or something to the enemy NPCs. And then you have corrosive spray, sprays out a jet of corrosive acid that does damage to all enemies hit. So there we have some nice AoE damage. And then of course the Interceptor's support. So this is primarily, or maybe you utilize this for group play. And the target beacon, of course, that person takes increased damage. It says damage will switch to another enemy if the marked target is destroyed. So it kind of acts like maybe like a home beacon after whatever target you had targeted first. and then it moves on to the closest one. Then you have Rally Cry, which removes status effects from all nearby allies. Again, this is very interesting. I'm really waiting to see a healing ability, because we have damage reduction, we have increased damage, we have removal of status effects, but where's the ability to heal? And I'm wondering if that's going to come into play, again, because of the design of the game is primarily around your shield that only replenishes when you're out of combat. If you've watched when the two developers were streaming, the developer actually had to disengage combat because he was taking too much damage, and then that's the only way his shield would replenish. And of course, if you're killing the little minions, they would drop an HP orb. But if you're fighting bosses that doesn't have like waves of minions, how are you gonna heal? So I want to see if maybe the storm has access to some sort of heal, but I'm currently not seeing it in any of the other javelins. It says the Assassin's Blade, which is the ultimate, which we saw, which was the last ability where the javelin glows. You see it right here. That's basically the ultimate. And like I said before, I'm hoping all of the overtime abilities have some sort of an indicator. That would be really appreciated if they haven't taken the time to do that. So my favorite and what I find to be the most interesting is the Storm. The Storm is basically your wizard type javelin. A lot of its abilities do elemental damage, as well as they're very flashy, which is what you would expect from a wizard type javelin. As you can see there on the right side and the right arm, I wonder if you can load out, because the little circles that you see, they're called seals, and that's basically where all the magical or elemental abilities stem from. And so I'm wondering that if the different colors represent, is it just visual, or are the seals doing different sort of elemental damage, or is it just kind of like a visual effect to look cool? And so the Storm, of course, is your wizard-like character, and in taking a look at the abilities, open up, thank you. And so we'll take a look at the video clip that they have here on their website. And of course, a little different. Instead of kind of maneuvering in the air, it kind of blinks back and forth. It also has access to this is the melee ability that it has, and it kind of blinks forward and CCs. It does a knockdown, and of course it does damage. And you'll see, this is what I was referring to before, the little circle indicators there, those are called seals, and that's where I guess this particular javelin is designed, where its power comes from. And so we're seeing, as you can see, it does some ice damage. That's CCs. You can see the opponent is frozen. Does this huge AoE of electricity, and then it has its ultimate here that does hits 3 times. It does ice damage. It does fire damage. It does electrical damage. And of course, as I said before, it all stems from that right arm. So this particular javelin is not very tanky at all. It's designed for high burst, but cannot take much damage. It has a very small HP pool, primarily survives by staying in the air and keeping his shield up. So this javelin, as you saw, it does have the melee ability to blink forward and does a punch. And of course, the punch does a knockdown as well as damage. And of course, it has the ability to kind of blink as its ability to avoid damage. And the javelin does what's referred to as a fiery strike, which is where it repositions itself. It says it unleashes the seal of its arm to deliver an explosive flash that deals damage and knocks back enemies that have gotten close to them, giving the storm time to reposition. So that's basically its ability to knock down and disengage if they're getting focused. And it says the seals, which are built into the storm, can use various gear to tap into the Anthem to release raw elemental energy in the form of kinesis abilities. It says gear is picked up as loot during missions and can be equipped or swapped out between missions. Lancers can equip 3 kinesis gear abilities total, 1 for each of the sections here. And so I guess that's what maybe that's what was shown here in the slideshow, where the javelin has like the red and yellow and blue arm indicators, and I wonder if that's the 3 options that you have to choose from, basically. So the rest of the abilities, it does a lightning strike, which is that AoE one we saw. The ice storm, which shoots to a single target, does frost damage, and it freezes its opponent. You have flame for probably burst damage, and then you have something that's called Rime Blast. That's the one. It says fires a flurry of ice projectiles that deal damage and freeze close range targets. It says 2 different ice storms. I'm not sure if we saw the secondary one that does like an explosion of frost. And then there's living flame, which is a burst of flame energy that seeks out and ignites targets. So I guess it does damage and then damage over time to those who are ignited. And that's the blast seal. Excuse me. So then the next seal is the focus seal. It says they're hoarfrost shards that shoot out rapid shards of ice that slowly freeze a target in place. And that kind of sounds very similar to the Rime Blast. I would imagine it's that last ability right after the electrocute, where it's shooting out ice shards. I wonder why they would create 2 abilities that basically do the same thing. I think the blast rhyme must be AoE freeze, and then the Hoarfrost shards are single target, from what it sounds like. And of course, you couldn't have the same ability because it's a different loadout. It's basically you're swapping the arm out, or the seals on the arm, to do different abilities. And so this is the focus seal, which I would imagine is single target, hence focus. Does a ball of lightning that's a discharge of electric energy that can be bounced off a wall, which we saw. I'll show one of the developers was showcasing that ability, and it kind of bounces off the wall. And of course, if you can bottleneck your enemies into a small area, you can get it to bounce off the walls and do a lot of damage. You have glacial beam that fires a beam of powerful ice energy in a targeted direction. There's arc blast, which is basically chain lightning. It does heavy lightning that leaps to other targets for heavy damage. And then the next loadout, which is interesting because it seems like the Storm has access to a lot more abilities than any other javelin, which is kind of interesting. I wonder why they would kind of balance it that way. And so the third option is your support. So maybe the first one is AoE Your second one is primary single target, and then you have support. Says here it's called Wind Wall. That let's turn this off here. That does, it's basically impedes or deflects incoming enemy projectiles. You have Nexus, which creates a field that provides gear cooldown and a reduction to teammates who enter its radius. So of course there's no like mana pool or stamina pool in this game. Everything revolves around cooldowns, and the Storm basically helps the rest of his team by reducing the cooldowns. Again, we're seeing bits of team composition where it's either damage reduction, damage increase, removal of stat effects. We're seeing now the ability to negate damage with this wind wall. There's cooldown reduction, but where's the healing? I just find it really interesting that they would create basically what amounts to a holy trinity without the ability to heal, or to offer some type of like healing grenade, or you drop a beacon that replenishes or reduces the amount of damage that your javelin has taken, or someone throws out like a healing bot or something that runs across to your ally and it kind of like repairs their javelin. I don't see that, and I wonder how that's going to affect high-end rating on high difficulty, because what we'll take a quick look at is when two people are fighting in a mission, and the only way for them to kind of alleviate the pressure is to completely disengage from combat. And so of course the last ability is the ultimate, which is that one that we saw where he kind of rains down all three elemental elements. We saw like the lightning, the fire, the ice, and then of course there is the Eye of the Storm. It says minor armor. The Storm has a reputation for being a tempestuous javelin that can spell disaster for even experienced pilots. And so I wanted to take a look at one of their live streams. I did want to show this. I know it's in their media. The reason being is because, let's see, this is the live stream, and the reason being is because, here we go. So this is the live stream between the two developers, and I wanted to show you where he's playing a Storm. You can see the seals right there on the right arm, and the other developer is playing an Interceptor. And so as he starts to take a lot of damage, he basically gets forced here. This is it. So he's taking a lot of damage, and you'll hear him
Let me just
kind of talking about it. As I said, the only way to heal
I see her. You see her, right?
is
I have to run away just
by
very
finding.
briefly.
You hear him. I have to run away. So how is it gonna? How does that? Oh, excuse me. I didn't even switch it over. Let's take a look at that again.
I will follow you.
My shields are back up, so.
So you
Not
see,
mine.
like I said before, all
just
of
get-
the
get my
javelins
fire
have
so I can't
access to
fly.
a shield, and you see they had to disengage from combat, wait for their shields to regenerate, and then be able to go back into combat.
Okay, but I see her. You see her, right?
Yeah. I have to run away.
So it's
just
hard
very
to see.
briefly.
You can't see it's cut off, but you see the low health indicator,
All right.
and he says,
Hi,
"I have to
everyone.
disengage."
Looking at the world. Almost dead. There we go. Okay. How you doing back
And you
there,
see,
Ben?
you
okay?
can see his
Living the
health.
dream?
It's really short. It's like here.
All right. I'll come back.
It's very small. That little green
Let's
bar.
get in there.
And the reason that I think that poses a problem is because you have to stop playing. You basically have to stop playing the game and your character has to sit off, you know, somewhere in a safe zone, which for me breaks the immersion of the dangerous universe that they talk about, because the enemies, in my opinion,
I'm
should
actually good now.
keep pressing you.
We just gotta knock her out of the sky.
They should
that's
keep
probably
pressing
what-
you until
Yeah,
you die,
What's actually hurting me
not
is the Shaper Relic that
stop
continues to go
following
terminal.
you so that you can disengage
And then of course there's a brute
and
on the horizon.
basically get your shield. And you see him,
I'm
for the
just
most
going in
part,
now for
he's
the-
Okay,
low
right
health.
behind
He
you.
can't replenish his HP because the only way he can do that is when he kills a mob and then he gets the HP back from the mob. Otherwise, his only form of mitigating damage or absorbing damage is through the shield that replenishes after 3 seconds of disengaging from combat. And of course, the
Yeah, sure, sure,
interceptor
Yeah.
that he's paired
now the
with
brutes are
doesn't
in.
have that problem
Gee
because
golly,
the
I wish I sure had
interceptor
2
is
more
up
friends.
close, dealing damage up close, and so when
Um,
It's like,
the mob dies,
If you
he
can keep them busy,
regenerates
I'm
his
gonna try and take a
HP that
run
way
at the echoes,
because he's right in front of it.
Yep, okay, that's fine.
But I might go down. Brutes
And
are
you see
relentless.
here again,
Yeah,
he
the
has to
brutes are freezing
disengage
me, so
from
they have an
combat.
ice
This is the
attack.
third
If you
time
don't dodge
that
at
he's
the
been
right
forced
time,
to
you'll get
disengage
frozen.
from combat
Yeah.
But you can
because
break out
there's
of-
no ability to heal. There's damage reduction, there's taunting from the Colossus, there's removal of damage over time, status effects, but there's no ability to heal. And so I'm wondering, how is that going to affect in really hard combat? Are you just basically going to disengage from the game entirely for, you know, 5, 6, 7 seconds and then re-engage in combat and rinse and repeat? That can become very boring and mundane, and it takes away the fluidity of combat. And I'm hoping that they will address that in either their next stream, because
being frozen
excuse
by-
me, it's very prevalent if you're
All the people on
watching
Twitch are probably like,
this stream that they did on Twitch.
the developers
where
suck, man.
The developers,
doing?
and it's not that, see, he says though the developers suck. It's not, it's that there's no way to heal, and so that's a game mechanic problem. It's not a skill level problem. It's that it's a mechanic in the game
Great.
that they've
I got
overlooked.
this Valkyrie down now. I'm gonna come back and help you.
And so
Alright.
in the other skirmish, you kind of see the same
Okay, and
the
then
same
I'll
problem
showcase-
here. This is the first
Yeah, no, this
engagement
is
that they
the middle
have, and
one.
you see
I
him
think what
again,
we did is we
low
triggered 2
HP,
events.
up
That's
in
fine. So
up
why
in the
don't we just
left-hand
go this
corner.
way
It's hard to
and
see.
then
Maybe
just
I'll
do
pull it
one
up
piece at a
on
time?
Yeah,
on
we-
Twitch.
Ain't running. So
I'll pull it up
Okay,
on
so I'm gonna
Twitch,
get this
so
gauze
it'll
here.
be a bit easier to take a
Gonna
look at.
reload. Alright, I'm gonna charge it now.
Okay. So the thing about the storm here
Oh boy.
is my natural playstyle is to hover as much as possible and provide some remote
Let's try this again.
support.
So we'll go over
From
to
the
the
air.
Anthem,
Of course, without a shield, I can't hover as long, so I have
and it
to
makes it
recharge my
a
shield,
lot
make sure I'm going
easier
up and down.
to see what I'm referring to when you're looking at their videos. Mind you, there are only 3, and one of them was a debacle, so you can't even include this one into a live stream. Their other second stream was just basically how you can skin the different skins that you have access. So the only stream that they did in terms of the combat was this one. It's only one stream of 15
So
minutes,
let's
which
see
kind of
who's-
worries me
let's see
as
who's
a
won.
consumer, because I want as much information and especially when it comes to a shooting game, you want as much
Do we need to
gameplay
find
as
echoes here as
possible
well?
Yep,
to
yep,
be able to
so-
make
so on my,
a
on my
definitive
compass-
decision. And so in looking at, let's take a look at their first
Kind of
engagement.
Is the
You'll see
interceptor. And in
the
fact,
storm,
I
which can't take a lot of
experience,
damage,
so the way-
ball, which kind of
often
bounces around,
has
and
to
I'll try and
disengage. So
crowd
you see
control a
here,
little bit.
there is the
Hitting.
HP, and
I'm gonna get some
open that
altitude.
up.
Hold on.
So you see
Yeah,
the
I gotta
blue
back up
bar
a little bit
is the
here, but let
shield,
me know
the
when
green
you're set up.
bar
I'm
is
set
the
up.
HP. That
Yeah.
blue orb that you just saw
I'm gonna-
was that
so my
skill we
third
talked
weakness can
about that,
debuff
that
this
bounces
big
off
enemy here,
walls.
So he takes bonus damage. So I'm gonna do that.
And you see very quickly,
You can see the
look how much
big
damage he
bar,
takes.
man. Did
And
you
this
die?
was
No,
on
not yet. I have to run away.
this was on normal. This is the normal mode. And
This is
so
crazy.
very quickly
We're about
he has to disengage.
First event.
Yeah.
And then you see the other javelin is having a better time
Hey, what
because
difficulty did we put this on, friends in PR marketing?
he
Are we getting trolled
can
right
get the
now?
Oh, we
orbs
are. We're getting
that
trolled
drop
in the thousands of
when the
views. So
mobs
this is
die because they're right in front of them.
Freelancer difficulty,
And so this
which is
poses a problem,
apparently the middle
in
of
my
the,
opinion, when the content, because there are different modes that you can pick, different difficulties. And so if the difficulty is very high, how are you going to mitigate that damage? As a solo player, maybe you want to solo play as a storm. How are you going to do that when the storm is not designed for taking damage? And the only way that you can heal is by the little orbs that drop after you kill a minion. And since they drop right in front, that causes a class
this should be good.
or
This
the
is the middle
javelin
one. I
that's
think what we
designed
did is we
for
triggered 2 events. That's fine. So why don't we
range
just go
to have
this
to come
way
in close and
then
take a
just
lot
do
of
it
damage
one
just
piece
for the
at a time.
purpose
Yeah,
of getting
we ain't
healed.
running.
Doesn't make sense
So-
from
Okay, so I'm gonna get this.
a
this
player
up
stance.
here.
And you'll see very quickly, say his shields are full, HP can't be
gonna charge him
replenished,
Yeah.
and he takes quite a bit of damage very
So the
quickly,
thing about
and
this
then we'll have to
storm here
get disengage.
is
And
my
the
natural
primarily
playstyle is to
target
cover as much as
that
possible,
the enemies
provide
are
some,
attacking is
some
the
remote
interceptor. So
support.
he's not really getting focused,
from the
but the
air.
moment he gets
Of course,
focused,
without a shield, I can't hover as long,
has to
so I have
disengage.
recharge my shield
The
to
other
keep going down.
mechanic there that he said that he can't, his primarily mitigation is through flying, and the only way he can fly for long periods of time is with his shield. But he has no way to replenish
Okay,
his
so
shield
this scar on the
without
right, I think
coming
it's a
out of
good chance
combat.
to
And
use
you have to
your
come
ult
out
if
of
you can,
combat
and then I'll clean up whatever
for
you miss.
Yeah, I'm gonna
what
just
looks
get a little
like
bit of
3
altitude.
seconds
All right, can we
just
pop
for
my
it
ult
to
here?
start to
I'm
heal.
gonna come up as well.
And then
just
of course
so I'm
for
ready
it to replenish
Alright.
fully,
I'm gonna bring
it
all
has to
down
be
now.
about,
Diving in,
5,
going
6 seconds.
to go. Nice, nice, nice.
That disturbs the flow of combat.
Right. Take out that heavy. It's right beside you.
And of course that only is gonna become even worse, under heavier difficulty. So I want to see how they're going to
And
get
then-
around that, because
once we get these
to
guys
me
down,
that's a big
let
issue
me show off a
when you
little
have
bit
to
about this
disengage
interceptor
from
build.
combat that
we
often.
get
And
it.
mind you, this
If we
is
ever get a
on
break,
normal
Yeah, we're nearly
mode.
there.
This is normal mode
get this
for the
fire.
develop. This wasn't the
Scar Hunter, rather.
this wasn't the super easy,
I gotta- I
face
gotta cross the
roll
back.
Go down.
minions.
Okay,
This was
I'm
just
back.
like slight
Duck out a little bit
difficulty,
here.
and you're already seeing
So the
that
enforcers go
the-
down, like,
from the
And so I got
javelin
aggro
has
on you.
issues in terms
Okay,
of
coming as
of
good,
healing
get this
and
hunter out the way,
mitigating,
so I stop
a
getting destroyed.
So I'm
damage.
gonna throw down a wind wall to
The
protect me.
interceptor maybe doesn't have
Yep.
that because it's more
Okay, I'm flying
mobile.
over.
But
I'm just
I
gonna
wonder how
go for this
they're
wall,
they're
actually,
going
take the
to
rest of them out.
Okay, and then
address
I'll
that
showcase
for
the
solo
ult
players. If
later.
you want to play solo and you want to challenge, are you forced to do it on
Alright,
easy?
so I'm on the
How are
heavy
you
now.
going to find
Good,
ways
nice,
to
nice.
to heal yourself?
Ultimate
Since
lets
the only
me
way you can
become
heal
invulnerable
is
for
you
a
see the
brief amount of
orb.
time, which is great, and
You
then
see the
for
little
us
orb,
getting
it gets
destroyed.
dropped
So I'm gonna throw down
by
a
this
wind wall to
big
protect me.
colossus with a shield.
Yep.
So the
Okay, I'm
interceptor
flying over.
comes in from behind.
I'm just
This is the
gonna
shield
here as
that
well, actually,
mitigates
take the rest of them out.
projectiles,
And then I'll
which is a
showcase the
way
ult
that it can
later with the
mitigate
folks.
range attacks.
Yep.
And you'll see the interceptor
Alright, so
comes
I'm on
in,
the heavy now.
All right, good.
does his
nice,
ultimate,
Nice.
My ultimate
and you
lets me
see it
become
drops
invulnerable
now.
for
The
a
little
brief
red
amount of
orb
time, which is
that they
great,
display right
and
there.
then
That's the
does a
heal
lot of
that
melee damage to
that you have
everything
access
here.
to. It's the only way you can heal.
That was a
There's
nice
no
little
other way.
cleanup.
Okay, come help out.
But with any event,
for me,
I'm
coach.
looking forward to some new content. I'm hoping that we'll see a bit more of that, as well as, of course, more combat, which is really what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to more streams, more combat, more detail. I want to see if they're going to address any of these issues, because currently we don't have a lot going on. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get into the beta, the alpha from this weekend. I wouldn't, even if I did, I still wouldn't be able to talk about it. But just from watching and from what I've read, I'm following this game very closely. I'm hoping that they'll address some of these issues. But I'll be doing another streaming after Friday, because they're going to be streaming on Friday, and I want to see if they offer any tips or any other great gameplay that helps us get a little more detail into the world of Anthem. I'm Infamous. Thank you for stopping by. Appreciate everybody. I'll be posting this on YouTube, and I'll be back Friday with another Anthem stream, talking about anything that went on during their stream on Friday. They're supposed to be streaming Thursday. But it was Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern. I'll have to take a look. I'll have to take a look because I don't want to miss it. But you shouldn't miss it either. If I miss it, I'll watch it again on Twitch on their replay, as I'll be working that night. Thanks for everybody stopping by. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll be back. Thank you very much. Have a good night.